The view that Moses had personally written down the first 5 books of the Bible was virtually unchallenged until the 17th century. There were a few questions raised about this. For example, the very end of the last book of the Torah, the book of Deuteronomy, describes the death and burial of Moses. And so some rabbis said, well, Moses couldn't have written those words himself because he was dead and was being buried.
And digging deeper into the text, there are even more discrepancies.
For example, how many of each species of animal is Noah supposed to bring into the ark? One text says 2, a pair of every kind of animal. Another text says 7 pair of the clean animals and only 2 of the unclean animals.
In one chapter, the Bible says the flood lasts for 40 days and 40 nights. But in the next, it says 150 days. To see if the floodwaters have subsided, Noah sends out a dove. But in the previous sentence, he sends a raven. There are 2 complete versions of the flood story interwoven on the same page. Many similar discrepancies throughout its pages suggest that the Bible has more than one writer. In fact, within the first 5 books of the Bible, scholars have identified the hand of at least 4 different groups of scribes, writing over several hundred years. This theory is called the documentary hypothesis.
One way of thinking about it is as a kind of anthology that was made over the course of many centuries by different people, adding to it, subtracting from it, and so forth.
The armor of Goliath in the story, described in details.
He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and he had greaves of bronze upon his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. And the shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron.
It turns out that the clothes Goliath is described as wearing are anachronistic. They didn't exist at the time. Neighboring Egyptians had encountered the Philistines as well, and their records show the Philistines in what are now considered more accurate clothes for the time. Egyptologist Ted Brock helps us interpret a battle scene engraving that shows Philistine warriors in confrontation with the Egyptians. The vivid battle scene, with soldiers on boats fighting and dying, shows what the Philistines were wearing at the time.
The Philistines were wearing these feathery type of headdress. They wore some sorts of armor, probably not metal, but more likely leather. They carried round shields, and they had long tapering swords.
Goliath, in fact, is described not as a 10th century or 11th or 12th century BC soldier, but as a heavy Greek soldiers of the 7th to 5th centuries BC.
Why is Goliath's outfit about 300 years ahead of its time? Because the people who wrote the account of David and Goliath lived 300 years later.